designed to fill your passenger seat with chat about classic cars, all recorded from my 1968 Morris Minor Peggy. I'm Becca, and today I'm on a little bit of an adventure. I'm going to tell you all about that before we get to our first stop. So, repeated friend of the channel, Lewis, recently acquired a really interesting little map from, I believe, Facebook, of lots of Morris dealerships and garages that were selling Morrises in the late 40s and early 50s. And it's a really interesting little document that he actually shared over on his Instagram, the Morris Guy 1960. And I noticed that actually I'm quite well placed to visit a few of these locations that are listed in the addresses section and kind of see what became of what used to be some Morris dealerships that were in my local area. So today I'm going to try and hit 5 of them. We're starting off in Ramsey in just a few moments, hopefully, and we're then going to go round to Ely, St Ives, St Neots and Huntingdon. So we're going to hit 5 in today's, see what became of them, see how hard it was to work out exactly where they were on kind of today's streets, and get some pictures of Peggy in front of them. If you do enjoy today's episode, then please let me know, as I have scouted out a further 5 that are certainly achievable for me and Peggy to get to. So there might be a part 2 of today's podcast. Now, the addresses that are provided in the little booklet that Lewis got are of kind of varying quality and detail. Some of them give full addresses and street names and things like that, so have been really easy to find. Others have simply been the name of a street, and it's required a little bit more investigation work from myself, looking up pictures and things like that of them at the time, and even looking at some evacuation diaries from the 1940s to work out the locations of some of them. But we'll get into a little bit more detail about each individual garage as we're on the way to it. Now, as I said, we are starting today with the garage in Ramsey, and actually, as well as being my closest one, was one of the easiest ones to work out where it was, because it's one of very few that is still a car dealership today, which is really exciting. And I had no idea. I've actually driven past it so many times. It's a now second-hand car dealership, and it's really obvious, even though the address in the book does not give an exact number on the street, that it is the same dealership that was selling Morrises way back in the 1940s and 50s. So I was so excited to realise that there was one literally just on my doorstep and was still a garage, so we could make for some interesting pictures and footage. Really easy to work out and locate, and just an absolute joy to realise was just there. So it's on Whitefield Road, which is just off the main through Ramsey, and that's called the Great White. And then this is on Whitefield, which is a little road that's primarily surrounded by housing. And it's been quite interesting when I've been searching around on Google Maps to work out exactly the locations of these and what I might expect to find there when I get there, that a lot of them are in quite built up housing areas. So I guess the hope was that people who perhaps are walking past to and from on their way from work are tempted by the joy and luxury of a Morris vehicle in the period, and that's why they've ended up where they are. So that was actually a really interesting first stop for us on this little adventure, and it's probably going to be one of the most interesting that we get to see. The building itself is not something that I've paid a lot of attention to, even when I've driven past it. And when you get up close and have a nosy round, being a Sunday, being the fact that it's closed as a dealership today, I was actually able to do that. And yeah, there's lots of things there that really show that not only is there a dealership on the location where the Morris dealership used to be, but there's also signs of the kind of it being the same building on that site. It's definitely an old period building, and it's got a few of like the original kind of wooden signs and things that seem to have been either restored or preserved over the time since they've got it. So really interesting, great to see, and yeah, just a real pleasure to park Peggy outside of it and get a photo or two to commemorate her having visited it. The next one is not likely to be as interesting. It's listed with an exact number on the street of St Mary's Street in Ely. So that made it easier to find it when I was checking it out on Google Street View, except from that number doesn't exist now on Google Maps, and it's unfortunately been flattened into a car park, and we're unfortunately going to take Peggy to a car park in Ely where they once used to sell Morris cars. So it'll be interesting to see again if there's any signs of what used to be there, what it used to be kind of on that site, and things like ghost signs are really interesting when you're looking into this sort of thing on the sides of buildings that have kind of been preserved and shown what used to be there. So we've got, I think it's going to be about a 30-minute drive over towards Ely for us, thanks to some road closures, but luckily it's a lovely sunny day out, so a nice day to have a run out in Peggy regardless, and hopefully we'll get to see some interesting things over in Ely. It's a gorgeous place anyway, so we'll probably stop and get a few other photos as well while we're there. Okay, so that's ex-dealership 2 ticked off in Ely, and I've also managed to just quickly grab some photos of Peggy with the cathedral in the background, which is quite nice. I've not actually brought her to Ely, I don't think, for any length of time other than kind of passing through before, so it'd been nice to kind of stop and get some photos in the gorgeous streets here. But let's talk about dealership number 2. So dealership number 2 is listed in the book as 18A St Mary's Street in Ely. So we got to St Mary's Street in Ely, and if you look at the houses and things like that are on the street of St Mary's, you'll find number 20, number 22, and number 16 all the way through A, B, C, D, E through to F. And kind of between the houses of number 16s and number 20, you can actually find a car park. So the car park stands in what I can only assume used to be where we would have found the Morris dealership, but unfortunately it looks like whatever buildings and things were there are now no longer. There's no real signs at all of anything to suggest that there used to be a Morris dealership there, and it's just a lovely free to stay car park. If you don't know, Ely, all the car parks are free to park up in, which makes for a really nice day out. There's some lovely tea shops and historic things there. I was rather disappointed that the tourist board sign that was in there mentions the cathedral, Oliver Cromwell's house and all these other things, but again neglects to mention that that car park used to be a Morris dealership as far as we can tell from the little booklet that Lewis has got. But it's a really lovely little street that it's on. Again, it's in a more kind of residentially area. It's still quite close to the centre of the city, but really kind of a little bit out of the way again, it's probably to do with being able to get hold of that land and that space to be able to really display all the cars that you've got for sale in that period. There was quite a few people coming through that car park as well, because it is really quite close to the centre in terms of walking distances, and I think they almost have thought I was an absolute nutter for the fact that I had chosen to sit and take photos in the car park and film my little walk round for anybody who's watching over on the YouTube channel. We're now hopefully on our way to St Ives. St Ives, Cambridgeshire, not Cornwall, and this one was a really interesting one to kind of research. So in the book it's referred to as Green End Garage, and this wasn't a garage that I was familiar with in St Ives, given kind of how many visits and things that I've done there over the years. I was quite surprised that it wasn't mentioned at all, and so I started kind of looking online, Googling kind of what I could find about these locations. Was there anything that I could see mentioning Green End or anything like that? And I really came to nothing, apart from one website that had the memories of an evacuee who had been evacuated from London to St Ives in Cambridgeshire, and actually mentions in his memoirs that he was quite disappointed it was St Ives in Cambridgeshire and not actually St Ives in Cornwall. And he evacuates out to St Ives and then goes back to London for a period of time before both of his parents come back again to St Ives. And on the second time, because it's been so there's been so many evacuees, they end up temporarily staying at a place called Green End Farm. And in Green End Farm there is a family there who their son owns a garage very close to where the farm is, and the farm is called Green End Farm, and the garage that is also kind of on the edge of the land is Green End Garage. So we've found the name of Green End Garage, and we know that it exists during the war. And the descriptor that the young lad gives is that it is on kind of Houghton Road, but on meeting Ramsey Road. So this is more information than actually the book gives us, because there is no road name or anything really within there that gives us any details about kind of exactly where on this road in St Ives it is, because it's quite a long road. So we've managed to kind of narrow it down to this set of crossroads, quite central to St Ives. And I could carry on Googling Green End Farm, Green End Garage, and I know that crossroads pretty well, and there's no farm there. It's actually pretty central to St Ives now. It's part of the main kind of go through of St Ives that's away from the high street. So was really kind of confused that there'd been a farm there. So carry on Googling, and I actually find a listing for Green End Barns, which is a house for sale, one Green End Barns, and it turns out that the old barns from Green End Farm have been turned into quite luxurious houses, and they are situated behind these new build flats that are really visible from that corner, and you just cannot spot them at all from that crossroads, no matter how many times you drive past. And interestingly, just in front of where Green End Barns are, there is indeed a garage. It's now a one-stop for all motorists garage. They've got kind of a garage for repairs and things like that, and also kind of a pretty swanky showroom. And actually that area in itself has turned into quite a few dealerships and things like that for cars. There's a garage on the other side of the crossroads that is, I think it's a Kia dealership, but it does make for quite interesting that it took that long to work out exactly where this old Morris garage had ended up. And I've driven past it so many times and had no idea that it had this history. So I'm really excited to go along, park Peggy up, take some photos, and see if we can spot anything that even gives a hint about the history of Green End Farm and Green End Garage, and see whether there's anything that reminds us of its past with Morris. Okay, so we're just pulling away from stop number 3 in St Ives, which was actually more interesting than I thought. Not only does it have such a rich history in terms of evacuees during the war, but actually it's still got more there than I kind of realised from Google Maps and even driving past it as regularly as I do. There's the one-stop body shop and things at the front. I'd completely forgotten that there's the petrol station kind of to the side. There's a 7-day-a-week little hand car wash place that's kind of operating in the middle of it all. And then towards the back, there's actually still a used car seller. So it's interesting that we found 2 today that are actually now selling used second-hand cars. And the buildings that they're operating out of in the background, you can see, are quite old in terms of corrugated works and things like that. I didn't want to get too close and get absolutely soaked by the guys that were clearly busy washing their cars, but it was interesting to kind of spot that, which you can't necessarily see from the road. And the other thing that was quite good is that, having stopped and parked up and looked, I could actually see the old farm buildings in the background, which was quite interesting to spot and see that they were also still standing and part of the landscape, despite the fact that obviously the town and the population of St Ives has changed so massively since when that young lad was talking about his evacuee experiences. That's kind of quite a busy populated area rather than farmland now. So a really interesting third stop. I'm on my way now to stop number 4 over in St Neots, and this one is going to be quite an odd one, and we'll see how well we do in terms of taking photos. Again, this is a reason why I've done it on a Sunday, because I suspect that by the time I get over there, even if the business was open, they'll be closed by Sunday trading standards and things by the time I get there. And I believe, based on Google Maps, what is referred to in the map book of Lewis's as 11 and 13 of New Street, St Neots, is now a new building that houses a funeral home. But there does seem to be some older buildings about on the street, so it'll be interesting to kind of see what else we can spot around there, get an idea of what the kind of landscape is there as to kind of where housed this Morris dealership. We've got about another half an hour trip over there, so I'll see you once we've got there and once we've had our little walk around. Okay, so we're now leaving location 4 on New Street in St Neots, and really there's not a lot to see there in terms of anything that reminisces or relates to what used to be there. There's quite a few pubs surrounding it that look quite old, so I wonder how many drunk purchases there were of Morris's over time. But the actual location where the garage used to be, with the address that's in the book, is now a funeral home. That the building is actually dated on the side of it to 1999. So I wonder how long before that there was still a garage there, how long it was still operational. Again, it kind of just predates that sort of thing where people might be recording it online and it being kind of easily traceable like that. I'm sure that with a bit more time and access to kind of local records, you could find out a lot more if you were interested in doing so. But we're now on our way to our final location on today's little road trip around ex-Morris dealerships, and it's back towards Huntingdon for this last stop. Now, working out exactly where this one was proved slightly difficult on Google Maps. We do actually get a number of the address for this particular one. However, that particular part of Huntingdon has got some stuff that's still as was, probably when the garage was there, and some very new buildings that have all got kind of new numbering. So it's definitely going to be one that I'm going to have to have a bit of a walk round and nosy to see if I can work out exactly what it is. There is a car park directly on the area where I think the garage used to be, so we'll be parking up there to kind of see what we can find, what we can see, and whether some of the buildings that are in that car park might possibly have been anything to do with the Morris dealership that used to be there. So it's about a 20-minute trip back to there, see what we can find, and then it'll be time to kind of wrap up today's adventures. So that's it, we are literally just pulling out of stop number 5, the Huntingdon dealership for Morris from the little map book, and there really wasn't a huge amount to see. Number 7 doesn't exist now, both according to Google Maps and the following buildings around the area. It is truly within that car park where I parked Peggy. Within that car park there are some pretty old looking garages. They look like personally owned garages, to be honest, but that might well be part of what was the storage or something from the old dealership. So that brings us nicely really to the end of my little road trip today. In terms of kind of what I'd recommend if you were interested in going and visiting any of these, I'd say that, to be honest, the best one is the one in Ramsey, which was actually my closest one and the one that I had to travel the least amount of distance for. It was quite interesting to see, and again, something I just had no idea was there. So I really enjoyed looking at that and kind of enjoying that. And I suspect that if I can, I will get a few more photos there of Peggy, perhaps once she's had her restoration and things like that, so that she looks as fresh as some of the cars that are on the forecourt today. I also quite enjoyed the mystery of the St. Ives one, and kind of really delving into what I could find about the history there, and so quite interesting in that regard too. Plus I always enjoy a trip to Ely, so that was nice to go and have a brief little wander around there and get some nice pictures there as well. Whilst doing this podcast, it's really highlighted to me how much our landscapes and things have changed, and how much kind of car purchasing has changed since that little book was released by Morris to help you find your closest dealership. It's such a different world in terms of these dealerships feel really quite close to me now, but actually if you were purchasing your first car in the late 40s, early 50s, getting to one of these locations would have relied on public transport and walking. So what was a half an hour drive for me on reasonably quite clear and easy to access roads would have been completely different back then. And it really goes to show how much classic cars are from a reasonably different time, but also how much cars have really started to shape our landscape. I mean, look at St Ives, where an area that used to be kind of a farm is now several garages and things like that as well. Peggy's had a really fantastic trip out today, and I hope you've enjoyed coming along with us as well. If you, like I said at the beginning, if you were interested in today's, I have researched a few other of the dealerships more north of where I live for a separate one, if people would be interested in me going and visiting those as well. So let me know. Let me know if you've ever taken your car to what used to be a dealership for their make and model, and whether it was still there or whether you ended up sat in quite a lonely looking car park. But in the meantime, drive safely and happy motoring.